Excellent connection. Great. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday here out in Chicago. At least it's in the morning for me. I see Michael out here in the chat. Thank you very much for joining. It looks like you were 30 minutes earlier. So I'm glad you're able to stop by. And we got a kind of busy schedule today, I'd say, for a Sunday. And a lot of it is not necessarily what was covered in the weekly videos here. So I'll, of course, do a quick summary. And let me just show you the live stream agenda really quick here. All right, so for this beautiful Sunday morning, I don't know why I wrote here. Oh, yeah, we got it right, 8 a.m. Central Time. But we're going to look over the price action. I know a lot of people were excited at the end of the week. I know Monday through Thursday was kind of a fight there at that resistance for $20. But I'll also go over next the quick weekly news there and pretty much go through it very faster because I do have a video on that. And honestly, it could be summarized down to a few points there. And then we have a couple new items here. So they were briefly covered in a video I released yesterday, but we're going to go over the Defense Industrial Base Conference coming up. And then there was a tweet there from Wendy Anderson, and then the OpenAI drama and how I think this ties to Palantir. So keep in mind, this can be speculative in nature. Nothing is for sure. And there's things a lot happening right now, especially with Sam getting fired and possibly going back and just people figuring out what exactly is going on. So let's take a quick look here while people start joining the stream. And let's see the chat here. Oh, thank you very much for joining, Nolan. Yeah, Sunday morning here. It's going great. How is everyone else doing in the chat? Just let me know where you're at or just how you're feeling this Sunday, right? You know, feeling that cusp of being in the fall and then transitioning to winter, at least in Chicago. It's definitely a change of pace here where it really starts to feel the cold. So, but yeah, let's just get right into it then now here. And for those who've just joined us here, this is a quick look at the agenda. Now let's go to the price action. So yeah, the big news I think a lot of people wanted to cover, and you probably see it all over YouTube right now, $20 plus, Palantir explodes, things like that, right? And this is expected whenever this kind of price action happens, and taking a longer term lens, which I like to do personally at least. The day-to-day price action is interesting, of course, and taking it into the context of what's happening for the day. But for at least most investors that I believe, so there's not financial advice, of course, but the everyday man, honestly, or everyday person, yeah, looking at day candles, honestly, is probably what's best for most, especially if you're not able to monitor the market and you're not a trader. So, but as you can see here, we've been in this kind of whipsaw motion here. I believe this was around Dan Ives here back in August, but I have to double check. I know that hitting that $20 range was a huge point there. And, you know, right now we're kind of back to that point again. Now, the nature of it being here is kind of different, and you can already see this in the chart. So similarly, there was a gap up. However, when we were approaching this in November, and this was kind of an interesting time here when we're just like, oh, what's going to happen with earnings, the uncertainty around that, people looking for is growth turning around at least. And I'm not going to say that earnings was the greatest ever here, but I would say they actually probably were one of the best earnings that we've had and showing that turnaround point. So the market honestly liked that a lot, and we've run with it quite a way from that point on those days there. So yeah, more to monitor out here for the price action itself. $20, obviously a round number, a nice resistance point. It's divisible by 10, of course. So $20 psychologically is going to be huge. Valuation wise, just remember here, we're in that 44 healthily, I think we're like 44 billion, 45 billion market cap area right now. So people are taking into account, well, I don't know if people really should care about EPS at this point, and people always talk about that. Just maintaining that profitability is already big enough, but there's a lot of qualitative factors here and maybe even quantitative when I've talked about here. And that will be in the quick recap too of the summary. And looks like we got a few more viewers here, so I'm just going to go right back to the agenda really quick. Just talked about the price action, but this is the agenda today here, right? We got a quick weekly news I'm going to cover right now, but then we had some new items here with the Defense Industrial Base Conference, OpenAI drama, all of that stuff here. So let's switch back now. So for the week, there's a few things I wanted to cover, and if you want the nitty-gritty details kind of stuff, of course, I release a weekly video. I did run a poll here, not to sidetrack too much, but it looks like with the daily Palantir videos, there's still a population. I'm not going to say it's representative of every single person, but there's a strong population of people who would still like these weekly videos. And I understand everyone's got busy schedules. Some like to digest it all together. So yeah, I get it. But essentially, you could say that these were covered in the daily Palantir videos throughout the week. So yeah, just check out that upload if you have a chance, if you just want it all condensed here. But the biggest major points I would say were insider transactions, first of all. So we've seen, you could say, an acceleration of it, not necessarily of the amount of shares, but just having it all happen at once and people talking about it just because of the price action. I think people are more sensitive since we're hitting these kind of high moments here. The sensitivity does go up and hyper focus on this. But essentially the biggest, and I'll say in quotes, is just because of Peter Thiel's Mithril Capital selling 2.4 million shares there. Just keep in mind, though, that those shares have been around since 2012, 2013 on the books for them. And that's around a 13% of the ownership that they were selling, at least for that specific entity. So I have to look at which specific one. I think it's this third from the bottom here. But if you look at Peter Thiel, he also converted a few shares. It's not a lot in the context of it, but to us, 3.3 million shares from class. I always mix it up from, I think it's B to A here, but we can just take a look. Yeah, so from class B in the red here to class A. So yeah, dollar-wise, it doesn't really mean anything, but just so you know, there is a different voting structure between the two shares. B is 10, and then A is 1. My speculation is that this is just getting it in preparation for the open market. Now, if you look at the remaining Class A shares here, yeah, there's a ton, as well as Class B. So you could call it non-news here, but, you know, someone covering the company daily, it's at least something to note of. And, you know, the name and notoriety of Peter Thiel, people just want to kind of know what he's up to, especially as we're at this point in time in regards to price. Now, the other important thing I think that was highlighted, and I don't have it open here, but for Palantir, we are seeing 13F filings, right? So they had their own 13F filing. And if you're interested in their SPAC holdings, it's something to note of, at least. For me personally, it's at least at this point in time, it's not the biggest kind of numbers pushing anything, in my opinion. Now, for 13Fs for other institutions, so we already have the S&P inclusion here. Keep in mind, though, this is for holdings as of the end of 9/30 or September 30th or the last quarter. So the big thing here is that we are seeing institutions being net buyers here or increasing in their positions. So it's just a couple points that are pretty interesting here. So 39%, this is still low, honestly. As you become a more established company, I would expect this to be healthily over 50%. And it depends too, right? We just reached that gap profitability. And of course, that means holding it in your funds and ensuring you have the right weighting for any index funds if you're that kind of institution. But also, gap profitability is just sometimes the criteria, the filter. So without being fully gap profitable, not even just a quarter, but for the last 4 quarters in combination of that, then that's when you start to at least look at it here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more institutions at least taking a look now, which of course leads to more institutions buying or at least establishing positions here. Now, how fast that is, the velocity of that, or how many shares, that is still kind of up in the air here. And we'll have to see how Palantir performs, because we don't know if they're going to start taking profits if for some reason there's crazy price action in a certain positive direction here. So, but if we just take a look at the active positions itself, so at least holder-wise, that is quite an increase here. That's 150-ish more, 140-ish more, I think exact. And then the share difference here in positions. So even though, so yes, there's more positions in general, but the amount of shares as well being exchanged is almost threefold, you could say. So that's a huge factor and probably was a big explanation on why we started to see kind of very strong, I guess, volume at certain points here. I know, like, it was very interesting if you're looking at the day-to-day kind of price action. Sometimes, like, I would just pop in, and you could see very strong buying points at certain rounder numbers, of course, but definitely down in this $14 range, we saw a lot of support being given. And I'm thinking it was established here. And then after the sell-off, a lot of institutions saw this as an opportunity to come in. Of course, I'm just kind of speculating here. I haven't looked at every single institution buying out there. And what I also like to look at in those weekly videos and what we saw last week is huge amounts of shares for some folks. Of course, Vanguard is kind of what everyone knows about. They're just large in general. But then what I found the most interesting was the Jane Street Group here, 650% change. I think they had like 1.8-ish million, 1.5-ish million in shares. So it's always interesting to see the amount of shares, of course, but looking at it in relation to their previous position here, like a JP Morgan Chase, right? They picked up 164% more shares. So I think this was the wider narrative for the week, honestly. And, you had the little bits of news. I did cover in depth more Tampa Bay General. They released that video on Palantir's website. But I did have a dedicated video to that as well. Since I'm a healthcare data professional my whole career, the 3 points, and I just love pointing this out because everyone thinks of nurse staffing and they think of, and that's a big point there because nurses are highly paid. They have, overtime and all that stuff, and you hear about the burnout, but then you don't really think about the coding capture. So that's not necessarily low-hanging fruit here, depending on the processes of a health system. But it's always interesting to see if you're missing out on coding accurately. And of course, mistakes is horrible. You're going to deal with the insurance company and going back and forth and trying to get paid. But even just ensuring that you have all of the codes captured accurately, because if you think of how a hospital runs, you have a physician coming in, doing stuff. You have services being provided by technicians as well as nursing staff. And then all that working in tandem and capturing all the codes for the services, so CPT, but also capturing the diagnostic codes because that's going to allow you to, say a person has a certain disease, but you need the right documentation. And then all that working in tandem here, hospitals like to bundle codes together. You're going to have diagnosis-related groups like DRGs, but also revenue codes that bundle these all together. So very interesting stuff there. But let's move on now to the newer stuff. I know we got a few more people joining the chat, so let me just switch right back to the agenda here really quick. So we've already covered the price action, and I'll probably be referring it to it randomly at some points, but also we went over the weekly news. I hope that was quick for you all. There's a whole video on my channel there if you want to see the quick and dirty of that, or just watch each Palantir daily video. If you want to watch it in succession, right? That's going to be the more live reaction on the day-to-day. But now let's go to the Defense Industrial Base Conference here. And the reason why I bring this up, so it hasn't happened yet, just so you guys know. But Wendy Anderson, she did do a tweet here. So the ambassador, and this is for with Ukraine as well, they tweeted out here, and she just basically said, oh, Palantir is looking forward to being here, right? And what I really like about this kind of tweet here. So we already know Palantir heavily in support of Ukraine and ensuring that they have the targeting algorithms all set up here. And of course, there's a lot of other things that they're doing in regards to, with the reconstruction side, as well as the prosecution side for war crimes, a lot of things there. And then the sponsorship for their tennis player here. But yeah, essentially this conference being hosted on the 6th through 7th. This is to help convene on the industrial base for their military. So think about this. If Palantir is trying to set up and be in the foundational aspects of how they're going to coordinate as a country and building up their defense base, the opportunity there is huge, right? And you can say this falls under reconstruction because it does. And reconstruction is not only on the commercial side, but also on the military side. And what's part of that as well? So the United States, you might say that we have the greatest military in the world, and that I believe that wholeheartedly myself. But it doesn't just happen because you just order a bunch of stuff from other people. You have to have a strong industrial base as well that can support that. And World War II, honestly, was probably that shining moment that we've built it up. You have all those images of people going to work, right? So you have everyone joining the draft or those going off to war, but then you have the women at work that were joining in the factories. And this honestly also was what pushed that kind of, you could say it whipsawed when the troops came home, but essentially greater workforce participation, but it built up that industrial base here, especially on the defense end. So if we could see something similar, I'm not going to say it's at the same scale, and technologically, right, we're in 2023 right now versus 1940s and late 1930s, right? Ukraine has an opportunity here to really set itself up and to take control of its defense in regards to what it's building on its own. And industrial base doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be building weapons too, right? You can also just be setting up, maybe the fueling of how your army is powered and other things that are related, right? The logistics end of that too. And this could also be even within transportation in your country. Because if you think about how the highways are a mode for transportation for, of course, yourself to move your troops around, which is convenient. And you can think of the United States highway systems as well like that. But also for invasion purposes, Russia was able to take advantage of that as well. But that's also part of Russia's concern too, defending their own kind of open plains, right? That's always been a very sensitive sore spot for them, especially in the whole geopolitical sense. If the wider the plane for them, so if they can get closer and closer west, the slimmer they can get that plane of invasion for people going into Russia. So yeah, I really wanted to bring this up here because of that tweet here, and it's something to look forward to on December 6th and seeing the role that Palantir is playing and just having them continue to build up their relationship with Ukraine, right? It's definitely evolved over time a lot. And saying that they're going to fall, like maybe, right? And I still haven't been keeping up too closely with the details on the Ukraine war here. However, whatever victory looks like to you and however this conflict ends, if Ukraine is still standing here, that's already a lot higher than what people were originally thinking. And these were military experts. And just having that technology to help rebuild the country again, sets them up at least to defend themselves in the future. And then honestly, one of the biggest defenses you can do is setting yourself up commercially, because if you can become someone that's a supplier to a country, they're more likely and more inclined, not only just in geopolitical or philosophical reasons, but business-wise, they're more inclined to help defend you or to apply political pressure there. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Of course, this is going to be definitely in the long term. You're not going to see anything short term from this, and honestly, it's probably not going to be covered by the wider mainstream media here. So just something to point out. Now, we got a little bit more people here. Just going to say we just finished up the Defense Industrial Base Conference here. So check that out if you want to scroll back. But now we're going to go to OpenAI drama, and this will probably take up most of the time here. I think this broke near the end of Friday. So when it happened, I think a lot of people were shocked or kind of confused or just trying to figure out what was happening here, right? So for those who don't know, Sam Altman basically was a co-founder at OpenAI, leading that there, and basically the face of AI, especially when ChatGPT came out. So it's very interesting to see this happening, and I'll probably just go over this very quickly. There's a lot of other great videos and channels on YouTube that are covering this in more detail here. And honestly, this is still a changing story where we're trying to figure it out. But basically, yeah, the board ganged up on him. That's kind of the story right now. And yeah, they voted him out. And then I guess as allies of Sam, a lot of people were starting to, of course, leave as well, or at least talk about that. And then this created more pressure for the company. And even Microsoft's CEO, so Elon Musk, actually, I played a little quick clip. I didn't play the clip, I guess, but I just showed it in the back end as B-roll. But in this video here, I kind of go over my thoughts on how OpenAI and the drama here helps Palantir, and I'll get to that, of course, today and talk it out more thoroughly. But even Elon Musk, like, oh, well, maybe Microsoft in the background is doing something, and then their CEO just basically said, like, no, I stand with Sam Altman and all that stuff, and I, of course, support him in any endeavors he does afterwards. So it's interesting to see this all playing out here, because this instability in such a very public AI kind of company that you'll say in here developing LLM models. I'm not saying they're direct competitors with Palantir. Well, you could say at least on the media side, they're competing for that face time of being the face of AI and the reputation of being an AI company and all that stuff. So of course that's no question for OpenAI, but Palantir is still trying to get that limelight sometimes with everyone in front of them. Now, really quickly too, just as a side note, so OpenAI's corporate structure, they're a nonprofit, and essentially Sam was left vulnerable here. And this is up to debate, of course, what's important for our AI companies in the United States. Do we want this kind of structure where this can happen? And some people will agree that, oh, nonprofit, right? We're trying to do this for the safety of the development of artificial intelligence. So, of course, we have to make sure that at least, well, this is my belief, I guess, but I would think a lot of people want to make sure there's some form of equity in the development here. Not saying that the rewards have to be equitable, of course. It's those who contribute the most and create the most value. However, having that input and not kind of discriminating that can happen unintentionally, or, people are imperfect, right? So inputs can be imperfect. Data can actually be imperfect as well if it's just showing human behavior. Now, if we want to keep reinforcing that, that's another question. And that's happening right now. This is a tumultuous time to figure out as someone in AI, because you already have this decision happening militarily as well as politically. What's supposed to happen with AI and its development. Now, if you have questions of the companies and organizations that are also developing it, and this is a very long-winded way of saying that, well, do we want this kind of uncertainty in the organizations that run AI? Because now that we've seen it with OpenAI, we can think of Palantir, right? They have an F-class structure. So leadership-wise, those who hold it and founders, we don't have to worry about that. And you could even think of Mark Zuckerberg. That's probably a good analogy. In my video, I said Jeff Bezos. Maybe his retirement was a good way because he went on his own terms. But I would say Meta is probably a better analogy here, that you have Mark Zuckerberg with all of his spending on the metaverse. And obviously there were a lot of red flags here for investors that are like, well, we're spending billions and we're not seeing anything. So, but he's still in power, right? That share structure that allows founders to stay in power. And it's a very important thing to take note of, because do you want your organization to be run by founders? Do you align with their mission? Do you align with the way that they've been running it? And this is a very big question for Palantir. Palantir obviously is very strong in their mission and what they believe in regards to who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. And we know that they support the United States and the Western allies, of course, wholeheartedly. And this is going to flow through in, of course, their product development, the people they hire, the way they do business, their customers, everything there. So just bring up these questions of leadership in OpenAI is important today. And it's something that we want to ask ourselves, is this what we want? And then down to the dollar. And I know that this was also at least talked about. We're not necessarily sure this is the reason why Sam Altman was let go, but essentially, why? Why did this happen? Is it because he wanted to push the nonprofit away towards a more profitable model? And then people are saying, well, we got to make sure AI is more developed safely. And then, that kind of never-ending tug of war here, especially if you're in a nonprofit. You need to ensure your survivability. And I've worked for nonprofits before. It doesn't mean that you make no money, and salaries can be generous, just saying there. So the big thing is that, do you want to ensure your margins versus your mission? And then I'm not saying that you have to wholeheartedly not follow your mission, but there's always going to be that level of trade-offs. And that's just for anything in life, honestly. So the drama, though, all those come back for OpenAI, and possibly that the response was so strong here that maybe he's going to come back. And nothing is confirmed yet here. If you read through all the different articles, they talk about how there was a timeline not met, 5 p.m. here, the board kind of resigning and then letting everyone back in, Altman and Brockman, kind of those top guys there at the organization. So more to cover on the story itself when it comes to OpenAI and the drama around that. But the importance, like I wanted to mention, was that the F-share class structure is very important for Palantir. It helps them align with their mission. And if you're a shareholder, you should know that ahead of time anyways, right? You're going to be happy to do that and follow them. Now, if you're going to allow the mission to be playing out the way it is, you can still vote the way you want. It doesn't really matter what you say. But now if you have an OpenAI situation and you're kind of dealing with the future of technology here, it's pretty important to at least see what can happen out of all that. So it looks like I went through that pretty quick here. I know that I had the weekly news here, and I'm going to go look at the chat as well. Sorry if I've just been talking at you all. But yeah, I released this video yesterday here, the golden opportunity. So it's pretty quick. It's more of me talking over B-roll. So you could go check that out if you'd like. And then just hopping back to the agenda here. So that's all the agenda points. So it looks like we had a quicker news week here. And not every live stream has to be an hour long. I know the past couple Sundays were here. And I did go quickly over the news that happened all week. So for those who didn't see that part, at least, the huge thing was that we saw some insider selling here. We're seeing more of those SEC filings. And then we're also seeing institutional ownership. But remember, that's more retrospective, just to keep in mind there. So I always have to point this out when I make videos on this. But remember, this is retrospective here. They have to release these quarterly for these large institutions here. So this is their holdings as of 9/30. So a lot of things can change. Now, I'm not saying that they will, especially like a Vanguard, and that they're not going to offload a bunch of shares immediately. We'll see that reflected, honestly, in the share price or downward pressures. But it's just something to keep note of here when you're looking at the 13F changes now. But let me just go to the chat really quick here. And thank you all for attending this Sunday. I hope you guys are doing really well. Let's just take a look. Oh, we got here caravan out in Erie. Yeah, driver here. So it looks like you're going across the country. I think we stayed longer 20 here. So Dave, it's time for them to pay for years of shorting the stock. Oh, okay. Yeah, there are people who think that this is... yeah, and I think that's also possible, too, to see upward pressure just because of pure momentum, right? And I'm not sure on the short interest in the stock. I haven't looked at it recently here, but I don't believe it's at necessarily at those levels, like a GameStop, of course. But let's see here. What will likely be the next big U.S. healthcare provider hospital to choose Palantir? U.S. hospital beds to 20% by 2025. Yeah, that's a good point here. And let me just expand the chat so everyone can see it. Oh, that didn't work. Nice and big. But yeah, healthcare is probably going to be their biggest commercial. And this is their top line heavy industry regardless. So commercially, I could see healthcare being the biggest. Now, some may say it's going to be bigger than the military side and the government side of things. We'll see with the size of contracts and projects that they can take on. Now, that's a hard kind of thing. Who's going to be the next? So the way that it looks like, at least for the kind of customers that they're showcasing for healthcare, it's on the front-facing provider side. So I don't know if that necessarily means that they're going to continue doing that because they have the HCA Healthcare they love to highlight, Tampa Bay General, and then Cleveland Clinic. Of course, I shouldn't forget them. Very prestigious institution. Now, what I think is probably more important, and they're already setting up the use cases for the health system side here and what doctors are going to be able to provide and the staffing of that and for managing that. Now, on the insurance side, that'll probably be much more interesting. On the payer side, there's a lot of opportunity there. I've worked on the payer side in multiple facets. I've worked with payers too, and they tend to be the customers because they're the ones who hold the money, right? They hold out the pay. They pay everyone essentially. And honestly, so you could look at them more as like a financial organization, but they are, well, the way they act, honestly, and this is up to debate, but I think a lot of people could agree that they essentially do provide care, especially with prior authorizations and denying claims and approving claims. So in the end, it sounds like, well, regardless of what your medical professional says, the insurance company is still the provider in the end. And I shouldn't laugh at that, honestly. I shouldn't have chuckled there, but there's real stuff that happens that can affect people's lives. So we'll see how healthcare turns out and how they expand there. So let's see here. We got Robert to tell you, but Palantir to 15. Palantir to 15 is realistic. I'm not going to say that it won't happen. That can always happen depending too on the macro side of things. Do we see an unexpected change in tone from the Fed? Do we see inflation numbers changing around? Or do we see sell-off because we're just at a point in valuation-wise, or maybe just technicals here like, oh, we're at the 20, so maybe we should start selling a little bit. And then everyone starts thinking the same thing and an avalanche starts, right? I'm not in the business of predicting stock prices, and I don't think anyone really should be, at least if that's not your job to work in the short term. And maybe if you're Renaissance, that's a different story, right? Their whole business is kind of that algorithmic and predictive side here. And that's the really, I wish that I'd be able to do that, right? And this is over decades of work. So if you guys have ever checked them out, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen Renaissance or have heard about the Medallion Fund, crazy returns over just yearly, right? And then also, yeah, that's before the fees, but either way, net fees, 39%. Just think of like a Warren Buffett. And, to outsize, do the better than the market, with inflation, just do 10%, maybe a little bit higher than that. And that's not easy, I'm saying. But doing this and compounding that year over year since 1988, yeah, that's something to keep in mind here. And if I could get maybe 5 years of 66% returns consecutively, that would be more than enough to be happy with. Now, of course, if you have different plays like multi-baggers in your portfolio, that can definitely boost your returns there. But this consistency, right? Decades of returns, and this is not something that you can buy into. It's employee owned, and they cap the amount of funds there that they can invest in it. But it's definitely a great story, and there's lots of YouTube videos that have covered this. Of course, the founder there, but also the fund itself and its outperformance. So always something interesting to see there. Let's get back to the chat really quick. Oh, sorry. There we go. Just looking around here. Yeah, $15. Great. That would be a great buy opportunity. I mean, enough. Yeah, for some folks, yeah, that could be a buying opportunity. Honestly, for me, so talking about that, yeah, I could see that being something if I pick up more shares. Now, for those who don't have established positions, that would be very attractive. For those with established positions, it really depends, right, on your cost basis, the rest of your portfolio for sure. Even if you're starting a new position, just keep that in mind here. I'm not one to advocate just going all in and all that stuff here. Maybe because I'm a little bit older, right? But if your capital is small, right, percentages can be a big difference there, right? If it's like 50% of your net worth, but your net worth is only 10K. I'm not saying 10K is, you know what I mean, right? I'm not trying to diminish anyone's point in life, but yeah, 50% of 10K is different than 10% of 500K. So it's just something to keep in mind out. And Victoria, Australia, wow, okay, coming out from Australia here. Thanks for stopping by. But yeah, this is the tail end of the stream here. I was just coming through the chat. I know it's early morning for Sunday, so I appreciate you guys all stopping by here. And you know what? It's another week, and I'm going to do the daily Palantirs per usual. We'll see, though, right? If it's very, very light on the daily Palantirs, well, let me just show my screen here because I was able to pull it off 5 days in a row here. There were news stories, and Palantir helped me out releasing some videos, and then of course the SEC filings. But if you look here on the channel, we got number 5, number 4, 3, 2, oh, and there's 1. So honestly, I was impressed. And then I obviously did the weekly video, so I forgot that I signed myself up to do basically 6 days a week. And then the Sunday live stream, 7 days a week. So we'll see if there's breaks taking place in between here. But, I appreciate hanging out with you guys, so I definitely want to keep the Sunday live streams. I know for some, 8 a.m. is kind of early on Sunday. I'm Central Time, so if you're on the Eastern front, that's an extra hour there for you to sleep in. And then also you can always refer to this back, of course, when it's all posted up. But for those around the world, yeah, especially in Australia and the Philippines, we know we got Michael out there. Yeah, I appreciate you guys standing by here in the evening time and right before Monday, right? I'm sure work is going to be starting, but we have the holiday week too. So just for some housekeeping, I hope you guys don't expect daily Palantir to happen on the holidays. I expect Palantir to be releasing too much news or any news on those days. So in the United States, we're going to have Thursday, Thanksgiving, and then Black Friday is kind of that weird midpoint. Some people work, some people don't. Is it a holiday? Is it not? At least in the corporate environment, most of the time it's off here. So I don't expect to be releasing a video unless we have some more information out. That's interesting, at least for me to cover, but it won't necessarily be a daily Palantir, especially if there's no market open for that day. But yeah, thank you all for stopping by here. Appreciate it. And, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm going to do that as well. And you know what? I'll see you guys in the next video.